right, I am recording now. Yes. All right, great. So what I'd like to do right now is we're going to go over the bank account challenge together. So it's a good review of both having dependent classes that depend on one another, but also on a CSV file. So we're just going to take this one part at a time, step by step. So learning goals are create class, create methods inside the class to perform actions, and learn how Python does error handling. So requirement, create a bank class which will contain your account class and any future bank account logic. Okay, and we can definitely do that pretty simply. So first off, I'm just looking at this. Right now we have the README, and then we have a support folder with all our CSV files. So figure I might as well make a directory to hold my classes. Seems like it makes sense. I'm gonna do make directory classes. I'm gonna CD into it. And I'll touch bank.py. Here it is. Class called bank. And if we look at this, it didn't really give us any much about that. So for now, we can just leave it as is. So requirement 2, create an account class which have the following functionality. A new account should be created with an ID and an initial balance. Should have a withdraw method that accepts a single parameter which represents the amount of money that will be withdrawn. This method should return the updated account balance. Should have a deposit method that accepts a single parameter which represents the amount of money that will be deposited and should return the updated account balance. And I should be able to access the current balance of an account at any time. Okay. So we can start by making account.py, touch.account.py. There it is. All right, so it said it needs to be initialized with an ID and an initial balance. So we're gonna do def init, take self, ID, and balance. Self.id equals ID and self.balance equals balance. All right, that looks like it has that functionality then. Should have a withdraw method accepts a single parameter which represents the amount of money that will, whoop, what happened? Okay. All right, withdraw method that accepts a single parameter which represents the amount of money that will be withdrawn. Method should return the updated account balance. Okay, we can do that. So def withdraw. All right, and so which argument should this be taking? Self, yep. Yeah. Yeah, so how much we're withdrawing, because the balance is how much is in the account, and what we're trying to figure out is how much we're taking out. So yeah, amount works. Quick review, what does self refer to in the context of this method?
The method itself. Oh no, the account class.
Yes, so in this case it refers to the instance of the account class. So if I were to print self, and then create an account, we would be able to see that. In fact, let's try that out right now. I'm gonna add a print self here, and then implement the rest of the method. So you can say, so self.balance minus equals amount. And then it said specifically return the new balance. So return self.balance. So I'm just going to quickly make some driver code, test this out. We'll give it an ID of 1, a balance of 100, act.withdraw, want to withdraw $90. So yep, so the thing, so self, the thing that got printed, is a main account object. So I'm going to clear the screen. So at any given point, whenever you're working with object-oriented programming or any other kind of programming, really. Concepts like self, and in JavaScript, they have something called this, which is kind of similar but different. Understanding what self or this is at any given point is kind of key to figuring out what you're doing and why you're doing things the way you are. All right, so the withdraw method looking good?
It's possible that someone might try to withdraw the amount that's larger than their balance, so it should be if statement. If amount is that you're trying to withdraw is less than balance, then withdraw it.
Yeah. So he's saying is that it's possible that we can withdraw too much and that we should have something that prevents somebody from doing that. And we actually have an error handling section right here, which I didn't read. That was my fault. I should have read that before I started coding things, right? So look at error handling. It says, a new account cannot be created with initial negative balance. This should raise an exception, leverage those Googling skills, and the withdraw method does not allow the account to go negative. It should output a warning message and return the original unmodified balance. So these are two different ways to handle bad input. So let's look at that first one. A new account cannot be created with initial negative balance. This should raise an exception. All right, so how do we do that?
Try accept.
So we could try accept. We could also rate. So we could also raise an exception. I'm going to take a look at the Python documentation to see what it says here. So you can get an error just by doing things wrong. Exceptions, even if a statement or expression is syntactically correct, it may cause an error when an attempt is made to execute it. So they have some different errors here. So you can't divide by 0. You can't use a name that hasn't been defined. You can't necessarily convert an integer object into a string without using a method. But we want to handle exceptions. They have something here called try and accept. So they have something here that says try doing this, and then they have accept value error. So it says the try statement works as follows. First, the try clause between the try and accept keyword is executed. If no exception occurs, the accept clause is skipped and the execution of the try statement is finished. If an exception occurs during execution, the rest of the clause is skipped. Then it is if it's a type matches the exception named after the accept keyword, the accept clause is executed and the execution continues after the try statement. If an exception occurs which does not match the exception named, it is passed on to outer try statements. So a try statement, it sounds like, is kind of like the try accept is kind of like an if else, but essentially saying, if we don't get this particular error, do this. So in this particular case, I'm not sure if try is going to work because if somebody tries to do it with a negative balance, as far as Python's concerned, that won't be an error. That's a valid thing to do.
What we did, sorry to interrupt you, but we did in assert greater than 0, that actually created the exception.
Assert greater than 0. So you mean?
Not try block. We did that. And then assert greater than 0.
Mm-hmm. But is assert greater than 0? Are you talking about the unit test method? Okay, so I didn't know there was a method that called assert greater than 0. So let's take a look at that. I'd like to find out more. So I'm getting unit test here.
Well, we didn't call it unit test. It was literally just assert, so we didn't even unit test in front of it. It was in the try accept.
Here it is, the Python assert keyword. So if condition returns true, nothing happens. If condition returns false, assertion error is raised. Oh, okay. So in that case, a try statement would work because we would know what type of error we're getting. All right, let's try that then. So I'm gonna refactor my init here. So I'm gonna say try, and then it was assert, I'm sorry, balance is greater than or equal to 0. So then we just do self.balance equals 0, or balance equals balance. And then we could say except
Maybe assertion error there.
assertion error. And if that happens, and then we can, yeah, we can just print balance must be greater than, cannot be negative. Okay, cool, let's try this out. So let's say I try to create a balance of negative 100. Run the file. All right, we have balance cannot be negative. Attribute account object has no attribute balance, because that's an error that happened here because, so if I get rid of that line trying to withdraw something, balance cannot be negative. All right. All right, so that works. Very good. And if we can look at what they wanted for the withdraw, does not allow the account to go negative. It should output a warning message and return the original unmodified balance. So in this case, they don't actually want us to raise an exception. They just want us to, sorry, I'm gonna feel like a sneeze is coming on. Excuse me. They just want us to say, hey, you can't do that, and then return the unmodified balance. Get rid of the print self. So we could say something like if self.balance minus amount would be less than 0. Print insufficient funds. And then just return self.balance. And if that doesn't happen, then we just subtract it and return self.balance anyway. Any questions about how we're doing this so far? All right, let's get a deposit method going. Deposit takes self and an amount as an argument. And there's no limits on how much you can deposit, so just self.balance plus equals amount plus equals amount, and return self.balance. And should be able to access the current balance of the account at any time, we can just call on account.balance and it'll return it for us. All right, optional. Create an owner class that will store information about those who own the accounts. This info should have should have info like name and address and any other identifying information that an account owner would have. So I'm going to create an owner class, and kind of anticipating that we're going to be doing some CSV stuff in a bit, I'm going to skip the part of an owner having a property to track an account or vice versa, because we're going to be using CSVs to do that. But I am going to touch owner.py. Create a class called owner. And I believe it takes a last name, a first name, street address, city, and state.
So an owner ID.
And an ID. So that's a lot of things. So what's something we could do to refactor this to make it a little less dependent on taking in all of these arguments? Yep, so we could have it take an arguments dictionary. So instead of taking that, it takes args. And so self.id now equals args ID. Still have to do a lot of typing either way, though. Okay, owner class, ready to go when we need it. So let's move on to part 2.
No, quick question. Do we need the asterisks in front of the arms, or that doesn't matter per se for unpacking?
Good question. So do we need the asterisk in front of args? Well, let's look that up. So if we want to say, Python class, taking dictionary as argument. The Stack Overflow question might be helpful. So this person's a newbie to Python. How can I initialize the dictionary values inside the constructor? So I don't think we need an asterisk based on what I'm reading here. Don't think.
They use it there.
Oh, they used it here for optional arguments. Quargs is what that is. So just any other arguments you get. But I think. Okay. Okay. Quargs will only pack something like dictionary, tuple of dictionaries. If you wish to send a list of values without keys, you should use args. So this person appeared with a nice thing. So keyword arguments. So I believe we use that if we're using like this equals like ID equals 1, first name equals that. But if we're just passing in a dictionary, I don't think we need the asterisk. I believe that's what I'm saying here. This is using an older release of Python, I think, but well, we can also test it out to see what happens, right? So if I do, user info equals. Owner equals owner, taking user info. I run python owner.py, let's see what happens. All right, no errors. And if I print out owner, or like print out owner.name or first name. All right, so I think if you're using a dictionary, I don't think you need the star in this case. Good question. All right, so part 2. So we're going to be updating this to handle CSV file and file input. So for example, manually choose the data from the first line of the CSV file and ensure that you create a new instance of your account using the data. Add the following class methods to your existing account class. All accounts returns a collection of account instances representing all the accounts in the CSV. And find returns an instance of account where the value of the ID field in the CSV matches the passed parameter. So we take a look at the accounts.csv here. We've got 3 comma separated values. We've got an ID. We have a balance, and we have the date created, which is a date time thing. So 1999, 03, 27, time period, time zone, stuff like that. So first off, we got to make sure that we've given an additional parameter to our object. It needs to be able to take a date created. So we can just quickly add that. Whoops. All right, so what we want to do is, in this particular case, the account class doesn't need to know at all times what all the accounts are, because that's the CSV's job. It just needs to be able to access that CSV to get all of these and return account objects. So it said that it wanted it to be a class method. So first off, who can tell me what a class method is? What's the difference between a class method and an instance method?
So class method is just like a class variable. It exists not in the instance of the class. Well, actually, it isn't. It does have to be, the class has to be instantiated before you can access it, but it's kind of shared between the whole, all of the instances.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes. So you're saying is a class method is a lot like a class variable in that it doesn't belong to one particular instance of the class. It is shared between all of them. And so why do you think that they said, okay, all accounts should be a class method instead of an instance method?
So a single account can instantiate all accounts.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's all about single responsibility. A single account shouldn't necessarily, it doesn't make sense for its job to be getting information on every account. I shouldn't have, if I'm the president of a bank, I shouldn't have to be able to access my own bank account in order to see all the other bank accounts. I should just be able to have access to all of them. And how do we make a class method? How do we tell Python this is a class method, not an instance method? Yep. The keyword at class method. And this just says the method we're doing underneath this is a class method. And we're calling this all accounts. It still has to take an argument, self.
CLS, right? CLS self here, because you're not doing an instance.
Yeah. Actually, I believe we could call it either thing.
Okay.
It's just what we're calling it in this case.
Convention.
It's convention. So essentially it's defining CLS or self, whatever we called it. It still represents, okay, what is self in this instance? Oh, it's instead of an instance, it is the class as a whole. So it serves the same purpose as self. And if we called it self, it would still function the same way. But yeah, let's call it CLS because that is more Pythonic, you're right. And it doesn't need any other arguments, it just says get me all of them. But we need to access the CSV. So we'll need to import CSV. Are we going to need to import any other libraries in order to access this?
OS.
Yeah, we're going to have to get the OS path methods in order to get from the classes folder to the support folder. So we could say import OS. All right, so when we do that, we need to first get our path correct. So we could say something like my path equals os.path.abspath, os.path.name. The directory name is a file, _file. And yes, I am in fact copying this from a previous thing because I can't be bothered to memorize something like this. So don't feel bad about not memorizing this kind of thing. I'm gonna say path equals os.path.join with my path. And then we need to get the relative path from account.py to accounts.csv. So what's the relative path there? We look at our file structure.
Classes. OS support.
Yeah.
memories of ..
Yeah.
Yep, so we need to go up one level to get into the bank account folder, and then into support, and then into accounts.csv.
So that's the relative path from the CSV file?
That's the relative path from account.py to the CSV file.
If you did it right, it looks like it's autofilling, but it knows it's in there.
Yep.
So we gotta go back for we are in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let me think for a sec. So if I take a look here. So
CD dot dot.
Yeah.
it's just like yeah.
You have to get out of classes to go into support.
Yeah, so relative path works follows the same rules as navigating via the command line. So right now I'm in the bank accounts level. I'm in the bank accounts directory. By ls, I've got classes and support, so I can go into classes. There's owner.account.py. So to get to the CSV, I go cd ... cd support, and there are the accounts. And I could train that all together. cd ... / classes. So yeah, follows the exact same rules. All right, then we can say, we have our path set up. We can say with open path as CSV file. And, all right, I always forget this next step. So what happened? Anyone can remember what happens next before I look it up?
You have to you have to stitch in.
Yep, that's right. So CSV reader equals CSV.reader, taking CSV file as an argument. And then we could say for row in CSV reader. And for now, let's print out the rows just to make sure we're looking at what we think we're actually what we're looking at. So now I should be able to say account.allAccounts.
We should be able to count out line 33 and still have it work.
Let's try. Let's find out. So now we don't have any instances of account, but we still have the account class to calling on the thing. All right. So the class can still call on class methods even if we haven't created any instances, because the class exists once we compile this Python file. And here we have every line. Great. So we've accessed the CSV reader. We have access to every single one of these rows in a list. So, well, what's the return value that we're hoping for here?
Individual account.
List of this is all accounts, so don't we want a list of these?
Yeah. So we want a list of all account objects, These aren't account objects yet. These are just strings. So we can maybe say accounts instantiated to an empty list. And then we can say accounts.append. What we're appending is a new account object. And luckily for us, we put ID, balance, and date created in the same order they are here. So we could do row 0, row 1, and row 2. And then at the end, we want to return accounts. So now I want to say print account.allAccounts. Uh-oh. We had a problem. What does it say? So that's our error. We have a type error, and it's coming in line 32 in account.py. So accounts.append. So line 32, but then it says line 6 in init. We go to line 6 in init, so we assert that balance is greater than or equal to 0, but the error is greater than or equal to is not supposed to be instances of string and int. So what happened
the number
here?
is a string that it's reading as CSV. It's not reading it as an integer to check the value.
Exactly. So we need to convert this into a integer in order to be able to compare it to the balance, or compare it to 0. So now if we run that, now we have a list of account objects. What questions do you have about how we created this method?
What did you do? Sorry.
Go ahead.
What was rows 0, 1, and 2?
Sure.
That was my question too. Just
Yeah.
you talked about the order.
Yeah. So if we take a look at the rows when we printed them out earlier, So it gave us, each row was given as a list, and every item in that list is a string.
Oh, you mean
Third column, so
column.
0
Oh,
column,
okay.
1 column, 2 column.
Yes.
Okay.
So these are all the columns. And in this case, since we didn't have any headers built into the CSV, but I knew that they would be in this order, I thought it was safe to just say, okay, I know what order it'll be in, so I'll just take it as 0, 1, and 2, because those are the order the columns come in.
Is it possible to get the same result without using add class method? Could you write some function that does that turns those count strings into objects without add class method?
So what he was asking is, could we have done a method like this where we create strings from the CSV without making a class method? And absolutely we can. Their at class method doesn't really have anything to do with accessing the CSV in particular. The class method is just saying, okay, what should this method belong to? Should it belong to an instance, or should it belong to the class as a whole? But we could write an instance method that does the exact same thing without making it a class method, and it would do the exact same thing.
The only thing is that we would have to instantiate an object account.
Yes, that would be the difference, is we would have to instantiate a account object before we called on it, and then, which again, doesn't really make sense in terms of single responsibility.
You could just sort of like account dot all accounts without the instance, and that would work.
Exactly. Any other questions about all accounts? Okay. It also wants find, returns an instance of account where the value of the ID field in the CSV matches the passed parameter. Okay, we can do that. So this should also be a class method. So in this case, it's going to take CLS and an ID as an argument. All right, so is there anything from our previous method that we can take to help us create this method?
The MyPath.
All accounts.
Yeah. So we have two options. We could copy this whole MyPath thing,
That's true.
or we could literally just call on our all accounts method. So at that point, it kind of becomes an issue of, do we want to get every class in order to, every instance of the class in order to find one of them? Or do we want to search through the CSV file line by line and only get that one thing? So which one do you think makes more sense in terms of like optimization?
So the second would be faster.
Second one would be faster, and it's less intensive on our memory because we wouldn't have to create a bunch of account instances if we're only looking for one. And remember what John was saying, or was it Tom, about how arrays are stored in memory? So if we don't need a list of accounts, why have one? But we can still copy a lot of this code. Love copy pasting. This is all the same. And so what's the difference? What?
Well, we'll have to check for the key, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have to check for the ID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if ID.
If it's provided.
Yep. And we know, again, the first column in each of these rows is the ID. Yes, we could say if ID equals row 0. Then we're going to return an account object with, again, row 0, row 1, and row 2. So we just create one account object. And if we get through the entire thing and never find one, didn't really tell us what to do, so I'm just going to return none.
So the row 0 is returning, like when you're checking it, is it a string or an integer at the point? When you're checking it, like the row 0 item,
Yeah.
the number.
Good question. So all of these are going to be strings. By default, most things in a CSV or even in most things in a CSV are strings. It'll always read them as strings by default, even if they're made entirely of numbers. So this is a string, this is a string, this is a string. It'll serve this as a string too, not a datetime object. So you got to be careful with data types. When we're talking about SQL, when you retrieve data, even though they're technically stored as string values, they also have something that essentially tells the computer what type of variable to value to convert it into afterwards. All right, I'm going to test this out real quick. I'm going to try to find the ID of, let's do 1216. Oh, I'm actually going to have to make sure I write this as a string because that's what it's going to be looking for. So we got an account object. And if I want to figure out what that account object's ID is, I can do that. Got me the account with the ID of 1216. Any questions on how this worked? Remote, how are you all doing right now?
Following along.
Why did you return none?
So I said to return none only if after this loop is finished. If the loop completes without returning anything, that means it couldn't find anything with that ID, so we return none instead. Because we have to return something.
Okay.
Cool. All right, so let's see here. What time is it? 10:48. So, all right, so I want to get kind of, let's see here. There's still a lot I want to cover. All right, so first thing I want to do now is I want to make it so that an owner should be able to see all of their accounts, and an account should be able to see its owner. But I don't want to do that by having the owner or the account class have an attribute called owner or accounts or anything like that. And the reason I want to do that is because, again, single responsibility, law of Demeter, they should know as little about one another as is humanly possible. If I want an account to have an owner, I want to be able to point to that owner, but the account shouldn't know anything else about the owner, or as little as possible. It's the owner's job to know about itself, after all. So in order to help an owner keep track of the account, I am going to do what I'm going to do. It's a couple things. First off, I'm going to import CSV and path here as well. I also want to import the account class. So I know there's a kind of a different way I have to do that. How would I import the account class from account.py?
Support that
Yep, classes.account.
classes.
Yep. And I'm going to import account.
Path is from OS, so we have to import OS.
You're right, thank you. I got confused. There we go. All right, so if I look at my CSV files, I've got 3 CSV files. I've got accounts, I've got owners, and I've got account owners. So accounts and owners makes a lot of sense of what they're for. What's account owners? What's the purpose of this CSV file?
It connects the account owner to, it's basically like a join the accounts with the account owners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this thing is essentially what we call a join table, meaning its purpose is to serve as kind of like a bridge between accounts and owners. So in one column we have an account ID, the other column we have an owner ID. And so if we have the ID of one, we can get to the other. So in that case, I'm going to make a method here called account. Okay, so in that case, so I'm the owner. As the owner of this account, what do I have? What information do I know about the owner class?
We have the ID, so
Yeah.
you need to match up with the other.
Exactly. I've got an ID. If I have my ID, I can find the thing here with the same ID. If I can find the thing here with the same ID, I can find the account with the matching ID. So in that case, I'm going to have to do some more copy pasting here about doing this. Or maybe I should make a method to help me do that. Well, actually, in this case, I'm not sure, because find would be like find this owner by this ID, but it's not linked to that particular CSV file. So, all right, in this case, I am going to do some copy pasting. Just going to have to, oops, get out of here. Get out of here. All right, copy pasta. Whoa, weird things happen sometimes. So we're not going to account CSV right now. We're going to account owners.csv, but it's the relative path is almost the same otherwise. All right, so in CSV reader here, I'm looking for the row with the same ID as this user, right? Or this owner. So I could say if, oh, wait, so we have to do for row in CSV reader. So if we look here, it's the second column is the one with the user owner IDs. So if row 1 equals self.id. So if I'm the owner with the with 19, we loop through this here. Not that one, not that one. Ah, we found this one. So we found the row that has the account ID that we need. So then what can we do? Well, we don't just want the ID number. We want the account itself, right?
Return that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now we have to access all CSV.
Well, we want all of the accounts, or do we want just one account? Yeah, so account, the class has a method now that can just say, if we have the ID number, we can find the account.
We can just port that in from all accounts.
Yeah. So we say return account.find, and it's going to take row 0 as an argument. And then, yeah, so if I do, let's see, what's the account? Okay, let's do an account. Let's give him ID 15. So and if I want to say print owner.account. Well, it's still a method. There we go. So now if I run owner.py, hopefully we should see an account object. Oops, owner.poo. Uh-oh. No module named classes. Uh-oh.
That's because we're still in the same folder. We're not doing any. So
It's just gonna be a
from
file.
account, import account.
Oh, my bad.
No,
Eventually when we have something.
no, we're still, okay, now we're getting another problem. No such file or directory.
Typo in the CSV.
Oh, did you use the wrong path on your account owners or wrong name for the?
Yeah,
Yes, I did. It's actually called account owners. I did accounts owners. That's got the kind of the, what's the word? Standard way of naming join tables. It's if you can't find like a cool snappy name, it would be name of the table, one table you're joining, then the name stapled to the name of the other table you're joining, then that plural. So account owners. But sometimes you'll do things like, okay, if like maybe you're doing like actors to movies, maybe you do like casting as the join table, because an actor can be cast in many movies, and yeah. So it's going to clear it and run it again. Uh-oh.
You input an ID that doesn't exist in the table.
Ah. I actually gave it the ID an integer of 15 when it should be a string. There we go. And to do the same thing, if I gave owners a class method to keep track of, find a specific owner, then account could do this exact same method here to get its owner. Like, it would be literally the same. I could just copy and paste it.
That is the reason we have find as also as a class method.
Exactly. Because if we want to find one specific class out of all of them, or one specific instance out of all of them, that makes more sense for the class to do, because that's a bigger picture thing. All right, what questions do y'all have about kind of using these classes and with the CSV to connect to one another? Okay, cool. So it's almost 11 o'clock, and I want to have some time to talk a little bit more about Lambda methods, and then give you guys time to just jump into the challenge, to the assessment. So I'm going to, I know we didn't finish the entire bank account challenge here, but I am going to cut this off here, come back, let's take a 6-minute break. So everybody come back here at 11:03. We'll jump into Lambda methods, and then we'll talk about the challenge.
Could you scroll on your runner codes before you grab this?
What is it?
Okay.
Or this one or the other one?
No, that's perfect. I just wanted to play around with this a little bit more.
Yeah. And by, I'll make sure to put this code up on GitHub.
Thank you. Yes, that's what we all need. All of us need it.
I have this
Yeah.
question.